Hello and welcome to Postgres FM, a weekly show about all things PostgreSQL. I am Michael, I'm founder of PG Mustard, and this is my co-host Nikolai, founder of Postgres AI. Hey Nikolai, what are we talking about today?
Hi Michael. I think it's time to talk about various mistakes, and I've noticed that many people, from my conference experience and so on, I noticed that many people love to hear about other people's mistakes. I don't know, why they love it so much, but I've noticed it's very popular when you talk about, we made this mistake, it was so painful, and people enjoy listening or watching about this. Maybe they want to learn something, I don't know.
Yeah, I love it, and there are two main reasons. One is the hope that by hearing about their mistake, I hopefully can avoid making the exact same one, avoid having to make that myself. It's extra painful. And then the second reason I love it is it just makes you feel better when you make mistakes, knowing that these amazing other people make mistakes all the time too. So I think that for me, there's that part of it as well. Definitely makes me feel better.
And it's already 5th episode of our podcast, and I think it should help our podcast to become even more popular. I've noticed we have quite good numbers so far, and I wanted to thank everyone who sharing and liking and so on. Please continue. It helps. We see this, and we also see comments in Twitter, feedback. It's so great to see it.
Yeah, and thank you to everyone who suggested ways we can make it better as well. Really appreciate it. Keep topic suggestions coming too. We'll try to get to quite a few of them over time.
Oh, and I also want to say big hello to all those who are currently running or riding bicycle and so on. It's good. I also need to do it. Okay, mistakes. If we talk about mistakes related to SQL and specifically Postgres, I think the most painful, at least in my career, it's always related to nulls. Nulls, this is the most the thing I hate most in SQL, in theory, in like SQL model, if you think about SQL model, in standard, in various database systems and specifically in Postgres. So let's talk about nulls today.
Awesome. And one of the reasons they're so painful is because the mistakes don't come back right away, right? You don't necessarily hit an error message, or you don't, that feels like they go invisible for a while.
Silent.
So that's a better word for it, yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yeah, hidden, silent, and so on. This is if of course, if you see the error, you can react, but if you don't see error, and nulls are very, very tricky in this field. Let's start with maybe some news about Postgres 15. There will be new capability that will allow people to say that unique constraints should not distinguish nulls. So there is only one in universe for some unique constraint. By default, all nulls are distinguishable, like they are all different. So we cannot say this null is the same as that null, because null means unknown in SQL logic. SQL logic is based on 3-valued logic. It's worth understanding what 3-valued logic is. And again, if you don't know, please check out Wikipedia or other basic articles. It's very fundamental knowledge everyone should possess. And so if you compare two nulls, the result is always unknown, which actually translates to null if we don't have unknown values, we have only null values. So like null compared to null, kind of also null. However, strictly speaking, it's unknown. And that's why if you define a unique constraint, you can insert as many nulls in this column as you want. This is, by the way, a big difference between unique constraint and primary keys, because primary keys completely forbid nulls in columns that participate in primary key. But unique constraint allow nulls. So you can, if it's a one column unique constraint, you can insert as many values of null as you want, as many rows having null in this column as you want. And this, in some cases, is not convenient to some developers, But so that's why in Postgres 15, long-awaited feature appeared, and you can say now that defining unique constraint, you can optionally. So default behavior is the same. You can insert as many nulls as you want. But with new option, I don't remember this option, but this option allows you to say that there can be only one null here, right? And this is like kind of I like that. This is explicit option, not a setting you change. Of course, it would be nightmare, and it would break all logic that standard dictates and so on. It's good that it's explicit, and for those who need it will have it. But
yeah,
I saw dangerous, I guess.
I saw a good blog post on this by Ryan Lambert, maybe a month or so ago. I'll share it in the show notes. I thought it was super interesting, but I was also struggling to come up with a use case for it. I didn't really understand why you would want to be able to determine that there was at most one null value in a column. Did you ever come across it?
Well, yeah. If you I remember somewhere in some articles probably or some discussions we compared like when you start understanding three-value logic, you are kind of infected. You always think about okay, we have unknowns. You start if you are more database guy, you start teaching your backend and front-end developers, colleagues, especially front-end colleagues who write a lot of JavaScript code, that unknown is unknown. You cannot return think it's about it as a zero or about it as a empty string. So and at some point you probably want to create some table and use a null as like unknown. And you can imagine, for example, we have true, false, and unknown, and we want to restrict only three options. It can be, for example, 2-column constraint. For each person, we can say you can. For example, it can be a poll results. So each person can say, I agree, I disagree, or I don't vote in this question, for example, right? And each person can say only once. So we can have person ID and result, right? And unknown result, we can use nulls to record that the vote is like unknown. But it's breaking logic, because in this case, the third option, I by purpose, I don't want vote is a kind of known result. So strictly speaking, I wouldn't do this. I would use, for example, -1 or something.
Yeah,
right? But some people may choose nulls, and then they want to restrict and say only one result for each person is possible. In this case, you want a unique constraint, and in this case, you would want to have only one null possible for one person. Something like this. This is what I popped up to my head initially. Like, I can imagine that this can be useful, but I would avoid it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I actually used to work at a company that did survey software, and we did have more than one negative value because we had, for example, you might have seen the question and skipped it, versus you might never have been presented the question, and those are different. So yeah, very interesting.
Various flavors of various meanings, right? So yeah, well, if someone I understand some people need it and Postgres reacts to it, it's good, but this is probably not the biggest problem with NAS. Actually, let's talk about other issues. For example, I had a bad situation like roughly 10 years ago. It was my startup, third one already, social media, and I was completely sure that it's good and market is ready and we should launch with great success. And I remember we launched slowly in spring first, and everything was ready to grow. And we used a lot of mechanics all social networks use. You might hate it or not, but when you check friends, initiating some invitations without lying, of course, because we know the case LinkedIn had and so on, but it's a different topic. So everything was ready, and I saw audience needs it and like likes it. But at some point during summer, we experienced very low growth. And I didn't understand why, because I see like if you talk to specific people, they are happy, they consider project very interesting and so on. Analytics shows us they use this system to connect to friends and so on, but somehow registration don't grow as I expected, as I projected. And my experience was already quite good because it was already a third project for me. I understand how people work and so on, but somehow it didn't grow. And I remember in early September, I went to digging what's happening. I went to code, and I saw some select, which I don't remember. It was comparison or some arithmetic operation, but it was not null safe. So the result was null, but developer obviously didn't expect. Result was unknown, implicitly converted to null, but the developer didn't expect null to be present there, and I just put coalesce there, and we started to grow like a rocket during next several months. So by the end of year, it was a huge success. So I just put one word, coalesce, there.
Wow. So what was this doing? What part of it, was it about suggesting people add others, or how did that limit growth so much?
If you're interested, it's off topic for us, but if you're interested, usually all social networks do they offer you to check which friends already use this service, and when you do it, they suggest you to connect to various contact lists from other services and so on. And if there are many. There is a bad area here if you don't expect invitations to be sent and press some button and invitations are really sent, and LinkedIn did it and they lost you to there are bad guys there actually in this area. It's
I do remember that. So back to coalesce. Should we that? My understanding of that is it returns the first non-null value that it sees. So you can, for example, put coalesce and then the result you're expecting.
0, for example. If you, for example, want to use arithmetic operations to make them null safe, you need to use coalesce to use 0 when there is no value. Otherwise, whole result will become null if at least one null is present among operands, right? And this was exactly what happened there. And because of that, the thing didn't work at all. and once we fixed it, it was it was so good. I was happy. But then I evaluated the loss, and it was estimated was $30,000 during several months. The loss of this missing one word.
And that's at a startup, right? That could be bigger at a larger company. So it's significant, and of course silent, as we were talking about before. It doesn't fail.
Yeah, it's just working, but not working well. Again, we had some registrations, but not enough, and it was so And you know what I thought about it? It's not a this person mistake. I would do the same easily. And even if you have 20 years experience writing SQL as I do, I completely 100% understand. I realize that I still have high chances to make to write some not null safe code. This is the thing that you need always to keep in mind, and it's so hard to just forget about it and have once again have not null safe operations, and it's just dangerous part of SQL.
So I guess this takes us back to why they're your least favorite part.
Right. So I also like the flexibility because true or false, it's not enough. You need something like unknown, and it was added by purpose. But the way it's working right now, it's maybe in future we will have some better tools that will. Maybe it's already exists. I don't know if our listeners can suggest something. Maybe there are tools that can put some warnings and say, this column might have nulls, and this operation is not null safe, probably you will have unexpected results. It would be good to have something like in CI/CD checked all the time we write code. But if you use ORM, which dynamically constructs SQL, it's probably not. Well, it's an interesting topic how to improve experience here.
They're the kind of.
I'm 100% sure we are not in the perfect position in terms of nulls in relational databases.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And tooling sounds interesting. I wonder if it could be like some even static analysis on. Well, I guess you might need to know that a column does contain nulls, but knowing that it could is enough, right? So it feels doable. I'm not aware of anything myself. That sounds very interesting. So is the message is basically remember that something could be null and handle it appropriately. But try to remember is the best, and maybe useful for code reviews as well. I think sometimes in teams that I see, there's sometimes more people that are comfortable reviewing back-end code or application code than there are reviewing database code. And sometimes there's an expert on the team or somebody who's better at this than most people. Perhaps sometimes their code isn't getting reviewed, or just remembering to review SQL as well.
Well, if you are a reviewer, of course, this is one thing you always should have in your in your bag of tools, like tool set of reviewers tool set. Let's check if all operations are null safe. But I think it's not right, because reviewers also can be like we should have the path that leads us to better results by default. So
definitely not the perfect solution, but for now, if there aren't, I'm looking forward to hearing if there are good tools for this. But if there aren't, and if neither of us are aware of them, for now, I guess that's what people need to be doing. The developer has to think about it, and also the reviewer.
Right, and we also discussed only arithmetic operations in comparison, but there are many more other places where nulls can shoot off your legs or arms, I don't know. For example, aggregates. Some aggregates ignore nulls, some aggregates don't ignore nulls. Some aggregates do it depending on situation. For example, if you do sum, again, like summarizing all values in a column, nulls will be ignored, of course, right? Although sum is based on plus operator, right? Like,
but what would the difference be if they weren't ignored? It would have to return null, I guess.
If you think about sum as first value plus second value plus blah blah blah, if null is present, the result should be null as well.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean.
But sum actually does coalesce, comma 0, right? So like it ignores nulls. So it's like null safe, right?
And another one is,
and it's
one people aren't probably aware of is count.
Count is interesting.
Yeah.
Count for column will also ignore null, so it won't count rows where you have null for this column. But if you say count star, all rows will be counted.
Very interesting.
Right. And if you say count table name from table name, it's possible, because like it's you can count the whole row, considering whole row, all its columns as one single value. It's Postgres magic. It's like a record type. Again, nulls will be counted.
What about, this is probably ridiculous and definitely not a real case, but if every column in the table was null, imagine a single row with every column null.
No.
Yeah.
Single, yeah.
Would that be counted by count table?
Yes.
Okay, wow.
Yes, why no? Because I also discussed nulls in some time ago, like 2 years ago, also live, and it was a YouTube live stream, and I said, of course, if we do this, what you described, it won't be counted. I do it, and I see it's counted.
That's so funny.
like it's so many unexpected parts when behavior is not as like it's definitely you can be an expert in nulls. It will take you. We could have some certifications like null expert in Postgres, and also like array AGG aggregation. What do you think? Will nulls be counted or like used or ignored?
It'd be a good quiz, wouldn't it? That's funny.
Yeah.
What would you?
If you have a chain of questions specifically moving to very bad places, so it would be tricky to answer everything properly.
Yeah. What grade would you give people at the end? Would it be A, B, C, D, E, or null? Maybe.
Or unknown.
Yeah.
So what do you think about array aggregation? Array AGG aggregate function.
I'm going to guess. I'm going to play this game, and I am going to say that it does not ignore nulls.
Yes, it will take them and use as members of array. Exactly. So you see, like it's it's a very complex thing. All with just one word.
That was genuinely a 50-50 guess, so I would definitely not have.
Okay.
I didn't know that.
Okay, but it will take it.
Cool.
Also, disclaimer, I might be wrong.
What percentage?
As I've said, no matter how many years of experience you have, you cannot be 100% right all the time with nulls. It's impossible.
But the crucial part here is not being unaware of which one it is. It's remembering that it might not be null safe in the first place. So or it might not do. There might be unexpected behaviors when you're working with data that can include nulls. So it's the same takeaway, isn't it? Remember that when you're working with data that contains null values, or I'm not even sure if that's the right way of saying it, that contains nulls, then remember to test, check, put some test data in, add some realistic test data, and then check that your code's working as expected. But the key part is remembering.
Sure. But I'm quite skeptical. I think people really understand all the dangers related to nulls only when they experience it in production. So, like, learning curve should be like should bring you some real examples to hit you so badly that you understand. Oh, next time I should be very careful.
Yeah.
So, also, only recently I learned, for example, there is JSON-B set function. And it can be used to set some part of JSON-B value to some different value. So not being need to override everything. So you can say along this path I need to replace something. And if you want, JSON also has nulls. If you want to put null there and say JSON-B provide some value and provide some path array of keys, and then say null, you will have whole value set to null unexpectedly again. So you need to use single quote null converted to JSON-B instead of regular SQL null. So it's like conflict.
When you say
everywhere danger.
When you say converted to, do you mean like the cast operator, or what do you mean?
Yes, casted to JSON-B. Null string converted to JSON-B. So in this case, it will be as expected. You say you only change the part of the whole value, not the whole.
So if I'm a team lead and I've got a few junior developers on my team and I'd like them to learn a few things around this, are there any good starting places? I know you said they probably need to learn through experience, but if I want to try and avoid that, what can I do?
Oh, it's a good question and probably a hard one. I will, of course, do some training maybe related to nulls. Of course, making sure everyone understands what three-valued logic is and so on, some theoretical basics and then some examples. I don't know, like it depends on the tools for education you have. Of course, if you have some playground where some database exists and you can do some exercises, it would be helpful. to write some code and see how dangerous null can be. But like I don't have excellent simple answer here. Again, as I've said, I'm very skeptical and think only when it hits you very badly, breaking some functionality, only then you probably will learn that it's really dangerous.
Yeah. I think I saw a really good article by Haki Benita that included some, it was definitely an error they came across, or an issue they came across, that I will share in the show notes. And I think you shared one from, is it Jeff Davis?
Jeff Davis, very old article and excellent collection of very unexpected examples, much more than we discussed here. So yeah, let's also attach the link
for sure
in show notes. Mm-hmm.
And I know it's difficult to ask people to go away and read stuff, but it feels like that learning that there even are these problems gives you a chance of knowing. I think probably sometimes people don't even realize this could be a problem. I definitely only learnt about Coalesce quite late I knew quite a lot about SQL or SQL before learning that Coalesce.
Anti-join example as well. If you use a not in and then expect and then have nulls inside in, you can also have unexpected. It's quite popular. I think all articles we mention they should discuss this example as well.
Interesting.
So anti-join also like have some problems with nulls.
Same with not exists, I'm guessing.
Here's the trick. Like I always forget about it actually. As I remember, not in is dangerous, but not exist is not. Something like this. But every time I deal with it, I'm refreshing memory and either experimenting or checking some blog posts or articles. Unfortunately, again, like it's a bag of knowledge you should carry all the time, and it's easy to stop thinking about it if you don't use it every day. So I think not exists is null safe, but again, like I don't remember on top of my
always test, kids.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, I'm yes. So testing is perfect. So if you think about something, just test it.
Oh yeah, actually one other. So in terms of learning resources, there are a couple of others that I thought were great. Probably always a good port of call is. Have you come across Marcus Winan's Modern SQL or Modern SQL?
Sure, long ago.
I think that's pretty great. I'd be surprised if they don't have something around this. And I think
they have.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. And do you know, the book Art of PostgreSQL? I think that's quite good in terms of like a mixture of beginner friendly and quite advanced topics.
Should be somewhere behind
the purple one, right? Awesome. Yeah. So those stand out to me as particularly good places to learn. Also, anything else on nulls you wanted to talk about?
Well, last thing I would like to add. You say like tested, and I say tested, but I think many times when people when they start, it's hard for them to test properly because to create proper test you need to understand the depth of the issue, and I wish some people I saw many times people go to some chats or some places where they can get public help and ask questions and got reaction like, oh, why you just don't test it? I wish some people it can be considered as negative actually reaction, but I agree that I don't know why some the new people why they don't ask, can you help me to create a proper test? So I would see myself, right?
Yeah.
So please help me to test it, all aspects of this problem. This would be a great approach to ask questions when you start with some topic.
I completely agree. I think we could definitely be a little bit friendlier in some communities in the Postgres world to newcomers, but equally I do also understand that we do get people that clearly haven't even used Google or even looked in the docs at the most appropriate place. So I think it goes both ways, but for sure teaching people how to share an online snippet or how to set a little test example in one of the fiddle tools or something like that, just to demonstrate their problem a little bit clearer, goes a long way. And if you're asking for help, it definitely helps to show that you've tried something yourself first. But
Right.
I think we can all improve there for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Nice one.
I hope it was helpful to
I
someone.
hope so too.
Quite basic material, but as I've said, even if you have 20 years of experience, it still hurts. So this basic material.
Hopefully this was a good public service announcement at least, and I think some of this is quite technical and quite difficult to do without examples, so the articles we share in the show notes might be extra helpful for this one, so I'll make sure to make those nice and clear.
Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention, I forgot. Since Postgres 11, we are in better place, in better universe. We live in better universe. Why? Because before Postgres 11, imagine if you have a billion row table, and there are many nulls. So and you add some
Yeah.
column, which can be true, false, and you think, okay, I want it to be strict. I want to have not null there. So only true or only false. Two options.
Exclusive lock, right?
But yes, updating billion rows, it's nightmare. I don't want to go with it. So I will consider nulls as false. And this is what we always did, because practically it was a big headache for us to update billion rows. So we started to treat nulls as false. And because practically it makes sense, you avoid big problems. But since Postgres 11, we can say default false. That's it, and it will be fast. Since Postgres 11, you don't need, and even you can say default false, not null.
What does that mean?
Yes, it's possible.
1 minute. So I think I understand. Yeah. So you can add a
You can just you get result you want.
Yeah.
Only two options are possible. All existing rows have false, and null is prohibited in this column. It's perfect. By the way, the same trick allows you to redefine primary keys in Postgres 11, but it's a different topic. Let's just discuss it another day probably.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, everybody, for listening. Keep the feedback coming, and I hope you have a good week.
Yeah, don't forget to share us as much as possible. We like it a lot. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Bye now.
See you now.
Bye.